Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. Somebody much smarter than I am suggested that I do a video on what kind of evidence the people in East Palestine, Ohio need to preserve in order to make claims later. So I'm going to take him up on that. Let's go down to the beach and talk about it. Lawyers don't win cases. Evidence wins cases. And in order to get evidence admitted, you have to be able to show the provenance of that evidence. In other words, you have to be able to show where that evidence came from. For example, if you have a document, let's say it's a business record from your doctor's office where it shows that you had a broken leg, you have to be able to get it admitted, and that means you have to have an affidavit from the custodian of that record. There are all kinds of technical evidentiary rules that are designed to safeguard the search for the truth. But they can be a hang-up for people who don't understand that system. So in this video, what we're going to try to do is give you some pointers if you've been the victim of a toxic chemical spill. So the first thing you need to do if you want to try and preserve documents or other evidence for a court case later on is understand the way they get admitted into evidence. And the way they get admitted into the evidence is usually through a records affidavit. That's how documents get admitted. And so one of the things that you need to do in order to, if you have any kind of symptoms related to this toxic spill, is go to your doctor's office, tell the doctor that you believe it's related to the spill, and get him to record that in the medical records. Get him to record and photograph any lesions, rashes, marks, changes in your body habits, bowel habits, bladder habits, anything like that. All of that needs to be recorded in order to make an evidentiary basis to make a claim later on. That's very important. But in addition to that, one of the things that you can do that may buttress your claim later on is gather evidence on your own. Now, to do this, you are going to need a notebook. I would use a theme book, one that the pages cannot be torn out of without leaving a big mark. And I would start on page 1 and I would document the things and evidence that I've gathered. For example, let's suppose you want to take samples from a stream that runs through your property. You can go and get some of these. These are sample containers that you can order off Amazon for, I think what it shows there is $7.19. And you can collect the samples. You then need to label the sample and write where you collected it. And if possible, in your little book, draw a little map as to where it was collected so that you can show exactly where that came from, date and time, and then put it in a secure place. I would also put a serial number on it, starting with the number 1, so that each time you go and collect these samples, you should probably do it on a weekly basis at least, you will have a running group of samples that show what the quality of that water was running through your property. This is a picture of a refrigerator water filter. Most of us don't have water filters on the way into our house, but almost all of us, those of us who have a ice maker anyway, will have a water filter in their refrigerator. And you should immediately take the one that you have in there out, replace it with a new one, and replace it every 3 months until you are certain there are no chemicals flowing through the water, or at least until you're assured of that. And then those, again, labeled and stored in a safe place, become a way for you to have evidence that you might give to a lawyer later on if indeed you discover some kind of condition as related to the toxic spill. Now, one of the newer causes of action, and it's certainly a cause of action in Missouri, and I believe in numerous other jurisdictions, is called medical monitoring. When you have a toxic spill or some kind of environmental hazard that presents itself, and it's related to malfeasance on the part of someone, you can do what's called a medical monitoring class action lawsuit, which essentially is a way for you to get medical monitoring, to go and get chest x-rays, for example, or blood tests, that sort of thing, MRIs, laboratory tests of any kind. These are this is a cause of action where a lawyer can bring it, and if you're able to establish that you were exposed to toxic materials, then you should be able to participate in that lawsuit. Well, again, if you have good evidence, you can do that. Select your air filter from your air conditioner, both the inside air filter and the outside air filter if you have one. A lot of air conditioners have a little screen around the outside. You can take a tray and wash that screen off and collect that stuff, whatever it is, and put it into a sample jar, and again label it and make sure that you store it in a safe place. And again, you have some evidence that can be used later on. You take your air conditioner filter, you pull it out of the air conditioner, you cut a large piece of it off, you put it into a plastic bag, and put that in your evidence collection kit so that you have something to show later on for what the air quality was inside your house. You may even want to go out and do something like this. Take a picture of a leaf on a tree, and if it has dust or other things like that, take that picture and then collect that leaf, put it in a plastic bag, and you may later find that scientific analysis of that leaf would be helpful to your case. Now, if all this sounds a lot like you're trying to become a Hardy Boys or Nancy Drew adventurer, that's not my intent. My intent is to give you some practical ideas that you can use to develop evidence and supply an evidentiary record. You know, I have never met a lawyer who went into court and said, gosh, I wish I didn't have as much great evidence to support my client's claims. That's because it's never happened. It's almost impossible to have too much evidence. But it is very helpful to have good evidence, and collecting and securing good evidence is helpful. And again, keeping a record of it, keeping it secure, keeping all of that stuff in a place where you can later turn it over to your attorney and establish what we call chain of custody. In other words, it was in my custody until I handed it over to my lawyer on July 3rd, and on July 3rd, he took it and put it in his secure evidence room, and that's where it stayed up until the time where it went to the laboratory to be tested. And then you can establish all of the things that occurred up to the point where the evidence is admitted into trial. That's very important, and it's very useful for your attorney to do that. Environmental cases are difficult because there are always all kinds of other environmental factors that affect whether or not somebody, for example, catches cancer. They develop cancer as a result of smoking. Did they develop it as a result of what they ingested? Did they develop it as a result of what they breathed through the atmosphere? It's very difficult to tell. And in almost no case can you actually show exactly that a particular form of cancer came from a particular agent. But you can get a lot closer to it and at least narrow down the issues so that it becomes an inference for the jury if you go out and you collect the evidence and do that in time to make it useful for the lawyers who may at some point wind up litigating your case. Now, I would also argue that you want to find a local lawyer to act as your agent in not just necessarily for the purpose of bringing a lawsuit, but to represent you in any lawsuit that gets brought. A lot of times, big law firms, the big powerhouses out of New York and Florida and other places, they will come into an area like East Palestine, Ohio, and claim to be the big dog on the block. And in some cases they are. But in other cases, they are not. So, my suggestion is if you have a local lawyer to help represent you, he will get a portion of the fee, but he will also make sure that your rights are secured under the law of your jurisdiction. And again, as always, all of this is just practical advice. It's not meant to be legal advice. The only person who can give you legal advice is a lawyer in your jurisdiction. Your mileage may vary. Some restrictions do apply. please check with a lawyer in your jurisdiction and do not rely on some random lawyer on the internet giving his opinion. Whether that's me or anybody else on the internet, you should do that. That's important. Again, I appreciate the person who suggested that I make this video. It was an excellent suggestion, and I'm going to try to get it out so that it is something that will be useful for the folks. And hopefully it will be useful not only for the people in East Palestine, Ohio, but also for the people out in Nebraska who had a toxic chemical spill out there. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. Like, share, subscribe, particularly if you know somebody in one of these jurisdictions and you think this might help them. I appreciate, as always, your subscriptions and your comments and your suggestions. They have been very, very helpful. I hope you will continue to offer them. Thanks for watching. Be kind to one another out there, and I'll catch you on here next time. If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.